All right, let's dive right into the AI Daily News Digest from March 19th, 2025. Lots to unpack today, huh?
Oh yeah, looks like a busy one. NVIDIA's GTC is in full swing, tons of model releases, and, well, the usual back and forth about open source.
You know, the never-ending saga. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, what do you say we set the stage for our listeners? What are the key themes we're seeing emerge from today's news?
Definitely a good place to start. I'd say one of the biggest things that pops out is this focus on specialized AI models. We're moving beyond just these massive general purpose models and seeing more tailored solutions for specific tasks. Like think about image safety.
Right, like the Shield Gemma 2 that caught my eye. It's a 4 billion parameter model, but instead of trying to do everything under the sun, it's laser focused on classifying images for safety.
And that's a really interesting development, right? Because it suggests a potential shift in how we approach AI safety. You don't always need the biggest, most complex model. Sometimes a smaller, more focused tool can be way more effective. And apparently, the licensing for Shield Gemma 2 might be a bit more open compared to, say, the larger Gemma 3 model.
Ah, licensing. That's always a hot topic, especially when it comes to open source. And speaking of open source, we can't ignore this Harvard study that came out highlighting the massive economic value it generates. $2,000 in value for companies for every $1 invested in open source. That's a pretty compelling argument, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we all know open source is a cornerstone of the tech world, but to see it quantified like that, it's a huge reminder of just how much we rely on it, especially in AI. Just think about all the data sets, the libraries, even the model weights that are shared openly. It's kind of mind-blowing when you stop and think about it.
And the study estimates that companies would have to spend something like 3.5 times more on software if open source didn't exist. So yeah, it's not just about the warm and fuzzy feeling of collaboration. It's a fundamental economic engine driving innovation.
It's all about lowering the barrier to entry, right? You don't need $1 billion budget to start experimenting with AI when you have access to all these incredible open source tools and resources. It levels the playing field and allows smaller teams and individuals to contribute to the field, which is amazing.
All right, so we've got specialized models, open source. What else is on our radar today? Oh, how about the ongoing discussion about AI benchmarks, the whole Goodhart's law in action thing, especially with the our local llama community? They're really raising some valid points.
Yeah, that's a really important conversation happening right now. Goodhart's law, in a nutshell, states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And we're seeing that play out with these benchmarks for local LLMs.
So, like, you can have a model that scores incredibly high on a benchmark, but when you actually try to use it for a real-world task, it falls flat. It's like acing a test, but not actually understanding the material.
Exactly. And the community is drawing some interesting parallels to the Volkswagen emissions scandal. Remember that. The cars were designed to pass the emissions test perfectly, but in real-world driving conditions, they were polluting way more. It's the same idea here. Just because a model passes a benchmark test doesn't guarantee it's actually useful in practice.
So, what are folks proposing as a solution? Are there any truly innovative ways to evaluate AI models beyond these traditional benchmarks?
Well, one idea gaining traction is this move towards more personalized, task-specific benchmarks. It makes sense, right? Instead of trying to measure some vague notion of general intelligence, you focus on evaluating how well a model performs on the specific tasks you care about.
But creating those personalized benchmarks, that takes a lot of work, right? Not to mention keeping them up to date as the models and tasks themselves evolve. It's not exactly a plug-and-play solution.
Definitely not. And there's also a growing push for evaluating models in more realistic application scenarios, not just these artificial test environments. So instead of just giving a model a bunch of text and asking it to answer questions, you actually have it interact with a simulated world or perform a more complex task that mimics real-world use cases.
Right, like actually have the AI control a robot arm to assemble something or generate code that can be compiled and run, stuff that goes beyond just, spitting out text on a screen.
Exactly. And I think we'll see even more emphasis on incorporating human feedback into the evaluation process. So not just relying on these cold, hard numbers, but actually having humans judge the quality and usefulness of the outputs.
Speaking of model popularity, Meta just announced that their llama family has hit a massive milestone. Over 1 billion downloads. That's a pretty staggering number, wouldn't you say?
1 billion downloads. That really shows you the reach of Meta's Llama models. And it was only yesterday, on March 18th, 2025, that they hit that number. It's clear that researchers, developers, you name it, they're all flocking to these models.
But of course, there's always some healthy skepticism around big numbers like that. Some folks are pointing out that things like repeated downloads for server instances, quantization, and fine-tuning could be inflating the figure.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's not necessarily a billion unique users, right? But still, a billion downloads is a pretty impressive testament to the model's popularity.
And it does raise some interesting questions about the infrastructure costs involved in hosting and distributing these massive models. I mean, estimates for Hugging Face's monthly AWS bill are in the millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about the behind-the-scenes costs, right?
Yeah.
Hosting these models, making them available for download, it all adds up. And as these models get bigger and more complex, those costs are only going to go up.
All right, so Meta's racking up downloads, but they're not the only ones making waves in the open source world. LG AI Research just dropped their EXO Deep reasoning models, and they're making some pretty bold claims about their capabilities, especially when it comes to math and coding tasks.
And the performance numbers are pretty impressive, at least on paper. They've got models with 2.4 billion, 7.8 billion, and 32 billion parameters, and each one is supposedly outperforming other models in its size class. They're even claiming the 32 billion parameter version can compete with some of the top open-weight models out there.
Sounds promising, but there's always a but, right? The Exodon AI model license agreement is, well, let's just say it's pretty restrictive. Research only, no commercial applications. LG retains ownership of the model and any outputs it generates. What's the community's reaction to that?
Oh, it's definitely sparking a lot of debate. On one hand, you've got folks who are excited about having access to these powerful models for research. But on the other hand, the restrictions on commercial use really limit the model's potential impact. It raises some fundamental questions about what open source really means when you have such strict limitations.
Right, it's this tension between fostering open research and protecting intellectual property. Finding that balance is tricky, and we're seeing a lot of different approaches to open source licensing in the AI world. Some are super permissive, others are much more locked down.
Exactly. And it's not always a clear-cut black and white issue. There are valid arguments on both sides. I think the conversation will continue to evolve as we try to figure out the best way to balance openness with commercial viability.
Now, for those who are eager to get their hands dirty with some of the latest models, Unsloth AI has some exciting news about the Gemma 3 family. They're reporting progress on full fine-tuning, even 8-bit fine-tuning support, and they've made it super easy for users to experiment with these features. You just set full fine-tuning load in 8-bit, true in your code, and boom, you're off to the races.
Yeah, I saw that. Really cool stuff. Full fine-tuning opens up a ton of possibilities for customizing these models for specific tasks and datasets. And 8-bit fine-tuning is a huge win for accessibility, as it significantly reduces the computational resources you need.
And they've even released a pruned version of the Gemma 327B model. They've shrunk the vocabulary size down to about 40,000 tokens from the original 260,000. That's a pretty drastic reduction, but it seems to be paying off.
Oh yeah, pruning can be a really effective technique for improving efficiency. By focusing on the most important tokens, you can reduce the model's memory footprint and speed up training and inference. And apparently, someone has already successfully fine-tuned this pruned model on an RTX 4090.
Not bad. That's definitely encouraging news for anyone who wants to experiment with these large models but doesn't have access to a massive server farm.
Speaking of massive server farms, have you been following all the announcements coming out of NVIDIA's GTC? It's been a whirlwind of new hardware and software.
Oh yeah, GTC is always a big deal. Jensen's keynote was packed with exciting stuff. They unveiled their new DGX Spark and DGX Station, which they're calling personal AI supercomputers, all powered by their Grace Blackwell platform.
Personal AI supercomputers. I love that. It really speaks to this trend of making powerful AI hardware more accessible, especially the DGX Station. Imagine having that kind of power sitting on your desk.
And they didn't stop there. They also announced Blackwell Ultra, the next-gen GPU architecture codenamed Feynman, along with their own ARM-based CPU called Rubin. And get this, Rubin is going to be integrated with Blackwell using silicon photonics. They even announced a new 1.6 TVP switch.
Silicon photonics is a game changer. Using light to transmit data on chip and between chips allows for insane speeds. And having their own ARM CPU in the mix really strengthens NVIDIA's position as a full-stack AI platform provider. They're controlling more and more of the key components.
And for the professionals out there, they introduced the RTX Pro Blackwell series, including the RTX Pro 6000 with a whopping 96 GB of GDDR7 memory.
That's some serious horsepower.
Yeah, 96 gigabytes of GDDR7. That's going to be a beast for handling huge data sets and complex AI workloads. We're talking about the kind of stuff that was previously only possible on massive server clusters. And amidst all the hardware hype, there was a little nod to the importance of efficient inference. The team behind the App Velm project was spotted during the keynote. So it's clear NVIDIA is thinking about the entire AI lifecycle, from training to deployment.
Absolutely. Efficient inference is crucial for making these models practical in real-world applications. You can have the most powerful model in the world, but if it takes forever to generate an output, it's not going to be very useful.
But NVIDIA isn't the only one making moves in the AI hardware space. AWS is shaking things up with their Trainium chips. They're reportedly pricing them at 25% lower than comparable NVIDIA Hopper chips. That's a pretty significant price difference.
Yeah, a 25% price cut could really change the game. It makes large-scale AI training more affordable, which could lead to even faster progress in the field. Competition is always a good thing, especially in an area as important as AI hardware.
And on the algorithm front, we've got a new kid on the block, DAPO, which stands for Decoupled Clip and Dynamic Sampling Policy Optimization. Their model, DPO032B, is apparently outperforming DeepSeek R10 Qwen 32B. Lots of letters and numbers there.
Don't get lost in the alphabet soup. The key takeaway is that DPO is showing some really promising results, especially on challenging reasoning tasks. And they achieve this using zero-shot reinforcement learning, starting with the Qwen 32B pre-trained model.
And the best part, they've fully open sourced the code, dataset, verifier, and model for DPO. That's a huge win for the research community.
Absolutely. Open sourcing everything allows other researchers to dig in, reproduce the results, and build on top of this work. It's how we push the field forward.
Now, the News Digest didn't go into detail about everything NVIDIA is showcasing at GTC, but the mention of NVIDIA Autonomous Vehicle, NVIDIA Dynamo, NVIDIA Robotics, and NVIDIA Omniverse tells us they're thinking big. Their AI ambitions go far beyond just foundational models and hardware. They're building a whole ecosystem.
It's not just about the building blocks, it's about the applications, right? They're showing how AI can be used to solve real-world problems in areas like transportation, manufacturing, and even entertainment. And that's really exciting to see.
So, for our listeners out there who are trying to keep up with this rapidly evolving field, what are the key takeaways from today's deep dive? What are the big signals amidst all the noise?
I think the biggest thing is this shift towards more specialized AI models. We're seeing a move away from these giant general-purpose models and towards more focused task-specific solutions.
And the open source movement is stronger than ever. Meta's Llama hitting 1 billion downloads is a testament to that. But it also raises questions about the infrastructure costs and the potential for inflated download numbers.
And we're having some really important conversations about how we evaluate AI models. The limitations of traditional benchmarks are becoming more apparent, and there's a growing push for more realistic, task-specific evaluation methods.
So as you continue to explore the world of AI, think about this. How can we measure the true impact and utility of these rapidly evolving technologies? It's a question that will shape the future of AI research and development.
It's a question that everyone should be asking, not just the experts. The more we understand how AI works, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the challenges and opportunities it presents.
Absolutely. So keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.